Many times when we talk about prioritizing and organizing our time, we talk about how to do more, how to be more efficient, how to speed up. This is not about that. This is about how to decide what to do first, what to leave for later, and what to safely ignore and postpone and maybe never get to do because frankly, it's just not worth it. JIT, just in time, or its fuller name, just in time, just enough, is a lean, agile principle about how to prioritize and decide where to invest your time and effort. In this video, I want to break it down and exemplify how we can use it to decide our day-to-day priorities. So the main idea with JIT is to postpone decisions and actions until the very last possible moment. The reasons to do that are the following. 1. The more time you let the need show itself, the more likely you are to understand what the real need is and to react correctly as opposed to overreacting or having the wrong reaction. 2. By delaying the things we don't have to do right now, we can instead focus on the things that we have to do right now. 3. It's all connected to the idea of value and the fact that understanding what actions create more value than others, it's not an easy thing to do. And the best way to understand what is really valuable is to let it emerge. For example, you're building a software product for accountants. You might, based on some analysis, consider that adding a new cool feature is going to make your software more attractive and more popular. You spend quite a bit of time doing that only to release it and find out that it's not being used. The JIT alternative would be instead to stay close to your clients, to the accountants, to get their feedback, to see how they use the application. And once a sufficient number of them bring up a certain point, then you take that point and you implement something to fix it. This is just in time in the sense that you let the need emerge and present itself from the real world and you act on it only when it's clear and validated and not before based on some imaginary problem. It's a philosophy of patience and restraint, but it's not a philosophy of laziness. It's about making sure that you're spending your limited time and effort on the things that matter most. I'm not saying that the JIT paradigm is the only one or always the best way to approach planning and prioritization, but I think it's a pretty decent option in most scenarios and is the closest I can get to making a general recommendation without getting into the specifics of the situation. How to take this general principle and apply it in our day-to-day decision making and prioritization? Through a formula. X is necessity minus effort minus opportunity cost minus ownership cost plus the cost of turning back and plus psychological readiness. The larger X is for a particular action, the sooner you should do it. The smaller it is, the more you should postpone it and maybe never get to it. Now, I'm not saying you need to literally use a formula when you plan your day or your week, but I'll use it to break down the thinking behind it so I can better explain what I mean. 1. Necessity or value. How serious, how important is the task, the issue, the problem you're presented with? Is it really a problem? Don't take what people tell you at face value. Question it. I don't mean that people lie, but people project their own understanding of what needs to be done and then they communicate that to you as the final solution that they see as necessary without sharing the thought process that got them there. Do you know what yak shaving is? It's a term coined by Carlin Vieri and the story goes like this. I want to wax the car today. Oops, the hose is still broken from the winter. I'll need to buy a new one at Home Depot. But Home Depot is on the other side of Tappan Zee Bridge and getting there without my Easy Pass is miserable because of the tolls. But wait, I could borrow my neighbor's Easy Pass. But Bob won't lend me his Easy Pass until I return the mushy pillow my son borrowed though. And I haven't returned it because some of the stuffing fell out and I need to get some yak hair to restuff it. And the next thing you know, you're at the zoo shaving a yak all so you can wax your car. There's a lot of yak shaving happening in companies and your job is to stop as much of it as you can. People engaged in yak shaving could be approaching you at any step of the process. Hey, let's go kidnap a yak and I have the blueprints for the zoo and here is the plan. They won't even mention that it all started because they wanted to wax their car, they might have forgotten it themselves, You have to dig that out, you have to ask the questions. This happens way more frequently than you would think. Starting from a particular problem, a sort of limited situation, people generalize their thinking, and by the time they get to you and they say, we need to do X, that X is 5 steps down the process and it has nothing to do with the original problem. You need to ask and probe and find out why they're proposing that, so you can solve the real issue and not an imagined issue. Now, if a colleague just asks you for a favor, do it. You don't have to be convinced or agree with them just to help them. But whenever someone is proposing something that is going to impact you or the team or the project, you have to understand why they're doing that. So the next time the business analyst or the client or whoever comes to you and says, we need to do this, the first thing to do is to understand why. What are they trying to solve? What do they think that will achieve? Validate the necessity. Now, this is not like a tense or conflictual conversation.
Why?
It's just you trying to understand what their thinking is. And you're doing that because by understanding their thinking, you might be able to propose a better solution, a faster solution, a cheaper solution, or all of the above. And that's something that everybody's going to like. 2, effort. The higher the effort associated with an action is, the more you need to delay that action until you're absolutely sure that it is necessary. If you have 2 clients of similar profiles with similarly important problems to them, but one of them takes 2 days to fix and the other one takes 2 weeks to fix the 2 days one first. You're getting the similar amount of value at the end, but only after 2 days, not 2 weeks. Effort and outcome or value are not the same thing. And your job is not to maximize effort, but to maximize outcome or value. If you need to hire 3 people for 3 distinct but equally important positions, but one of those 3 positions is much easier to fill than the other 2, fill that one first. You get 1/3 of the value, 1/3 of the outcome quickly. The faster something is to do, the less effort it requires, the more relaxed you can be about it. You don't have to be 100% sure, you can just do it, because if it's not the right thing, you didn't lose much time, you can do it again, you can go back. On the other hand, the larger and more complex something is, the more you need to carefully consider it and plan it before you pull the trigger. That's why it's very, very, very good to break down big projects into small projects and big tasks into small tasks, because you can approach them one by one in a less costly, less risky, faster, more flexible way. It's just minimizing risk, basically. 3, opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is all the things you miss out on, the things you're not able to do because you've chosen to do this thing. The time I spent making this video is time I cannot spend doing anything else. So when I'm deciding if I want to make this video or not, I'm not thinking about just this video in isolation. I'm also thinking about what other things could I be doing in a similar amount of time, and would those things be more useful to me, more valuable compared to the video? Obviously the answer was no if you're seeing this, but I'm considering that. If you're fixing this bug, you can fix that bug at the same time. If you're talking to this person, you can't be also talking to that person at the same time. If you focus on something, you can focus on anything else. Which one of all these options is going to bring you the most value? Hopefully the one you're actually engaged in. The opportunity cost you pay is highest when you engage in high effort, low value activities. That is the worst situation to be in. 4, ownership cost. The code you write today will have to be maintained, evolved, kept up to date. The process you implement today will have to be maintained, evolved, communicated, taught to people, existing people, and new people. Many times, this long-term ownership cost of something is higher than the initial implementation cost. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a piece of code, a feature in the product, a business process, a position, a template, anything you do, you'll have to carry with you, and it will add to the complexity of the product or the complexity of the business, and that complexity is a burden. Imagine you're preparing to climb a high mountain and you're packing your backpack. It's very tempting and very easy to want to put a lot of things in the backpack, just so you have them in case you need them. Let's get this snack and this camera and that compass and this spare clothes and that knife. Let's get it all. It's easy to want that, but you'll have to carry it all the way up the mountain and back. It's the same thing with the things we do in a team, in a product, in a business. It's easy to put it in the backpack, it's satisfying even, but you'll have to carry it. Consider that before you add anything to the backpack. That's why sometimes a leader's job is the sort of ungrateful duty of saying no.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
To many ideas that would otherwise be interesting if taken in isolation, and they have their merits, and people are very well intended when they make those suggestions, but keeping the bigger picture in mind and understanding how everything has a total ownership cost across time and adds to complexity, the benefits are not important enough to counter that. There's another dimension to this, and it's the mental burden of complexity, or having to deal with many decisions and many choices around you, the tyranny of choices. The more complicated something is to use, the less you will use it. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a process, a product, a best practice, a document, a software application, anything. I have this camera I film these videos with, among other things, and I used to have 4 lenses for it, with distinct but also overlapping functionalities. The simple fact that I had those 4 lenses always made me think like I had to choose the best suited one for that situation. So whenever I had an urge to just pick the camera and take it with me somewhere because I want to take some cool pictures, I had this hurdle in my mind, but which lens should I bring? Which lenses should I bring? And even though the actual effort of changing a lens is less than a minute, the mental hurdle stopped me from enjoying and using the camera as much as I would have liked to use it, because I would just, whatever, not even take it at all. I sold most of them, and now I only have 2 lenses, and they're very distinct and have very specific purposes. So really I have no choice now. And I've used this camera and I've enjoyed it so much more since I gave up that choice.
Things you own end up owning you.
It's the same thing in business. The more complexity to deal with, the less people are going to engage with that. So whenever you're adding something, always consider this complexity aspect and consider if you're making someone's decisions more difficult through your otherwise well-intended addition. 5. The cost of turning back. If you need to go downstairs to the corner shop and buy tomatoes, and by the time you get back you realize you also need bread and you need to go down again to the corner shop, it's not a huge deal. Mildly annoying maybe, but it's 5 minutes. If you go up the mountain for an easy summertime route of 3 hours, and once you get a bit up there you realize it's a little chilly for the clothes you're wearing, not a big deal. Even if you have to turn back, But if you go for a difficult climb in the winter in freezing temperatures and you don't have the right equipment, now that's not very good. And if you're mountain rescue and you're going up in the night in the winter to save the guys from the previous example, and midway you realized you forgot some essential equipment you need in order to save them and you need to go back for that equipment, that's actually bad. The cost of turning back is how difficult it is to change something, to go back and add more of something, to fix something, to adjust something. It's the cost of making a mistake. In business, we always strive to reduce the cost of turning back. We're trying to set things up in such a way that no single decision we make is like a huge make or break decision. Constant communication, small and frequent iterations, constant validation, constant testing, continuous integration, continuous delivery. All these things are ways of minimizing the cost of turning back. Because if we have these things in place, and even if we miss something or we make a mistake, we'll find out about it quickly and we can fix it with relatively little effort. In turn, this allows us to move faster and to try new things with more confidence, and that is exactly what we want. The smaller the cost of turning back is, the less we need to plan up front, the more bold and experimental we can be in our approach. So when you look at what your work is, think about the cost of turning back and think about how you can minimize it. One way to minimize the cost of turning back is, just like we talked about minimizing effort, to split big things into smaller things. Because typically there is a relationship between size and complexity and the cost of turning back. If you mess up a big thing and you have to go back and redo it, that's a big problem. But if you split it into smaller things and you mess up one of those things and you have to go back and redo it, that's not such a big problem anymore. 6. Psychological readiness. There's a right time and a wrong time for any given project or idea, psychologically speaking. Teams and organizations have psychologists too. They're collective culture and the way they look at things. There's a reason why radical change is usually done by a new CEO or after a crisis, because in those moments the organization is more psychologically prepared to accept that kind of change. Likewise, at an individual level. Maybe you just don't feel like doing that task today, you're not in the mood for it. Postpone it if you can and do something else. Do something you feel excited about and leave that for tomorrow. You don't always have this option, but sometimes you do. And when you do, take advantage of it. Prioritize also based on what excites you the most right now. And within the limits and the flexibility that you have, if you don't feel like doing something right now, don't do it right now. Can't always do that, but when you can, why not? So, to recap, X is necessity minus effort minus opportunity cost minus ownership cost plus the cost of turning back and plus the psychological readiness. The larger X is, the more you should prioritize this item. The smaller X is, the more you should delay it, postpone it, or never do it. Necessity. Validate the necessity. Question it. Make sure you understand why that needs to happen and what are the reasons behind it. Effort. Low effort, high necessity tasks are the best because you're getting the most amount of value, of outcome with the least amount of effort invested. High effort, low necessity tasks are the worst because they are very effort intensive and very laborious and they don't produce much outcome. If you get a big task, consider ways to break it down into smaller tasks. Also, consider the opportunity cost. What else could you be doing in a similar amount of time with a similar amount of effort that could potentially bring more value? If you find anything, do that instead and leave this for later. Consider the ownership cost. It's cool to add new things, but you will have to carry it with you for a long time. Is it worth it? Ask yourself twice. Try to decrease the cost of turning back through frequent fast feedback loops and constant validating. That will give you the confidence to make decisions, to move forward, to make mistakes, to try new things. For those few things where you can't reduce effort by breaking it down and you can't reduce the cost of turning back, these few things are the things you need to plan really carefully before you commit on doing them. For everything else, you can be bold and try it and do it and just learn by doing it. That's it.